Imagine buying a game knowing almost nothing about it. So I'm approaching this with cautious optimism. Except every friend you trust keeps telling you, don't look anything up, just play it. So I did. And I don't think I've ever finished a game that left me more confused than when I started. Why is his head square? Has his head always been square? I'm not sure what's going on with the stoat. But that's exactly why I loved it. Most games spend their entire runtime trying to answer your questions. Inscryption just kept giving you new ones. And somehow, I was okay leaving a few unanswered.
Wow. See, it's funny. I see the credits and I'm still not convinced the game's over.
Going into Inscryption, I was already stepping outside of my comfort zone. I've never really been somebody who plays a ton of card games, and roguelikes weren't really my thing either. So before I even launched the game, I was already learning something completely new. From everything I did know, I figured I was getting a creepy indie card game, maybe one I'd enjoy for a couple hours before moving on to the next game in my backlog, and honestly, that sounded like a pretty safe expectation. When I launched the game, the first thing I noticed was there wasn't even a new game button, just continue. At the time, I remember thinking, did I accidentally skip something? Why do I feel like I'm walking into a trap? It was a strange first impression, and somehow it only made me more curious. A few minutes later, I was sitting in this tiny cabin, learning the card game, poking around the room, finding things that clearly mattered, but without any context to truly make sense of them. Every path felt like it led nowhere, but I still had to check, right? At that point, I still felt like I was just scratching the surface. There were plenty of questions I expected the game to answer eventually. I just didn't realize it had something completely different in mind.
Hey there, card gamers. I'm the Lucky Carter, and this is another pack opening video.
Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before any of that happened, I still had a card game to figure out. I wasn't exactly great at the game at first. I lost. A lot. Part of that was learning the card mechanics, but honestly, a lot of it came down to the fact that I had no frame of reference. Every run taught me something new, and every mistake felt like part of the learning process. The first time I died after what I thought was a pretty good run, I was genuinely frustrated. Having to start all the way back at the beginning felt brutal, especially since roguelikes weren't really my thing. But after a couple more runs, I realized the game wasn't treating death like failure. It was treating it like progress. Once I realized that, every run stopped feeling like a reset and started feeling like another step forward. As I got better at the game, I started reaching the bosses more consistently. The repetitive parts became much quicker. I unlocked stronger cards, started experimenting a little bit more, and somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about surviving one run and started thinking about what I'd discover on the next one. Because as much as I was enjoying the card game, the cabin itself kept pulling my attention away from it. Every time I looked around, it felt like there was something else waiting to be found. The atmosphere was honestly unlike anything I'd played before. It felt creepy, but not in a cheap jump scare kind of way, more like it constantly felt like the game knew something I didn't. Even the talking cards. At first, I thought they were just a clever way of teaching the mechanics, but the longer I played, the more it felt like they were trying to tell me something. I just wasn't sure what yet. Okay. It would appear we're facing the moon. All of that being said, for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just enjoying the game. I felt like I finally understood it. Or at least, I thought I did. Because right when I settled into what I thought Inscryption was, it completely changed the conversation. Okay. Welcome to Act 2. Suddenly, I was away from the cabin, and inside what looked like an old Game Boy game. If you had told me 5 minutes earlier that this is where I'd end up, I would have laughed. But somehow here I was. A brand new map, a completely different art style, and another version of Inscryption waiting to be explored. The weird part was that I wasn't upset about it. If anything, I was excited. I've always loved that old school pixel art style, so even though the game had completely pulled the rug out from under me, it somehow landed somewhere that immediately felt familiar. It was confusing, but in a way that made me want to keep exploring. Not because I expected answers, but because by then I'd learned Inscryption usually rewarded curiosity. That didn't mean it was all smooth sailing. Mechanically, I was basically starting over. The deck I'd spent hours building was gone. The cards were completely different. The rules had changed, and for a while it felt like I'd gone backwards. Normally, that would have been enough to lose me, but somehow I trusted the game. Not because I knew where I was going, but because it hadn't let me down yet. As I explored more of the map, it became obvious the cabin was only a small piece of a much bigger picture. There were entirely new characters to meet, new decks to experiment with, and a surprising amount of freedom in how I wanted to approach everything. I ended up spending most of my time with Grimora's deck, not because it was necessarily the strongest. I just like seeing a different side of the game after spending so much time with Leshy. Every new area, every boss, every card I unlocked felt like it could lead somewhere unexpected.
Let's take another look at the Ouroboros.
And maybe that was the biggest change of all. I stopped exploring because I was looking for answers, and started exploring because I genuinely had no idea what I was going to find next. By this point, I'd learned to expect the unexpected. Every time I thought I'd settled into a new normal, Inscryption had a habit of reminding me it was still one step ahead. So when I caught myself thinking, what on earth is this game going to do next, I probably should have known better, because the answer was robots, and a lot of them. Welcome to Act 3. So, robots. I'll admit, this was probably the one transition I was the least excited about. I'd just gotten comfortable exploring the 8-bit world, and now that was gone too. PO3 never really grabbed me the way Leshy or Grimora did, but by this point, Inscryption had already proven it usually had a reason for everything. So if this is where it wanted to take me, I was all in. It didn't take long before I realized this section had something completely different to offer. The card mechanics felt fresh. Building a deck wasn't as simple as swapping cards around anymore. Instead, you had to work with what the game gave you, finding new little synergies whenever you could. It made every run feel a little bit different, and every good combination felt earned. Then there were the bosses, and somehow they managed to get even weirder. One had me digging through my files on my own computer, another let randomness decide how the fight would play out. One even had me battling against my Steam friends. None of them were the hardest fights in the game, but they were some of the most memorable. Every time I reached another boss, I couldn't wait to see what ridiculous idea they'd come up with next. Somewhere between the cabin, the 8-bit world, and the robots, Inscryption had completely changed the way I was playing it. Not because I'd figured everything out, but because I'd finally stopped trying to. Every new surprise became even more exciting than the last. By the time the credits rolled, did Inscryption leave me more confused than when I started? Absolutely. But somewhere along the way, I stopped treating that like a problem. Every time I thought I knew where the game was taking me, it found another way to surprise me. And somehow, that constant feeling of uncertainty became the best part of the experience. I sat with it for a few days before I looked up everything I'd missed. Not because I was desperate for answers, but because I wasn't quite ready for the experience to be over. If someone asked me whether they should play Inscryption, I'd tell them the same thing my friends told me. Just play it. Because you only get one chance to experience this game for the first time. And now, I finally understand why everyone wanted me to. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.